And thanks for joining us to introduce the Shavua Tov.
Okay, sure. Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov.
I'm sorry, Eitan, I wound up muting some other people because of the background noise. Good, okay.
Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimhera Yavo Eleinu, Im Mashiach ben David, Bimhera Yavo Eleinu, Im Mashiach ben David. Shavua Tov, 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 Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Eitan.
Okay.
Be right with you guys.
Oh, interesting.
El Yeshua Tietach v'lo echad ki arzi v'zimraja Adonai v'hili Yeshua u'shafte mayim b'sasan minei Yeshua l'Adonai ha'Yeshua al amcha b'chatecha sela Adonai tzvod imanim mizgav lanu hekov sela Adonai tzvod asher naboteach bach Adonai Hoshia HaMelech Yaneinu V'Yom Koreinu Laidim Ha'itor V'Simcha V'Sason Mikar Ken Tielanu Kol Yeshuot Esa Uv'Shem Adonai Ekra Savrei Manan Rabbanan Rabotai Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Borei Pri HaGofen Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Borei Minei B'Samim. Amen. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Borei Ha'esh.
Amen.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Hamadir Be'Kodesh Lecha Ben Or Choshech Ben Yisrael Amim Be'Yom HaShvi Baruch Atah Adonai Hamadir Be'Kodesh Lecha. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Well, I have tonight, I have a new source for a Shaila. It's a very contemporary question that was asked. It emanates from Israel, but it could very well find itself a home right here in the United States of America as well. Late one morning, Reuven sees Daniel, who is the gabbai of an outdoor minyan. The minyan happens to meet in the garden of an apartment building. Reuven lives upstairs in that building, and he has an office on the first floor of that building. And he attends that minyan. And when he sees Daniel, he thanks him for all his work in organizing the minyan and in allowing him to be able to daven b'tzibur and under safe conditions. He prefers to daven outdoors, and that's what the minyan is all about. But he says to him, "Do you think that it might be possible for you to move the minyan to one of the other buildings?" He says, "Why?" I really rather not say. He says, "Come in." I said, "Everything's working so well here." He says, I'd rather not say. And he says, "But I really would appreciate if you could move it." And Daniel says to him, "It's like great here. We have shade. Every minion that we need shade, we have shade. And in the hot afternoons, it happens to be that one building has breezes that are always there, unlike any other building on the block, and I think even beyond the block. So it's really a great place for us. And we don't leave anything behind. We don't make a mess. We don't bring any food. We don't leave any chairs or tables around. It's great for the minyan." And it's kind of, it's really public space. It's not anybody one garden. He says, "I know, but I have my office here on the first floor, and people, they look inside to my office." He says, "No, first of all, you could close the curtains if you wanted, and second of all, anybody walking on the sidewalk or passing by in the street sees into your window. So what difference does it make when everything is going so well?" So finally, Ruvain fesses up and tells him it's more than that. It's just that his business, he's a financial consultant, he has a staff, and they're talking all day long with their clients and advising them what they should invest in, how they should manage their money. And there's a lot of private information going on. And he's afraid that the people in the to the walls of the building and the windows of his office, he's afraid that they can overhear. And as a result, they've actually been trying to, almost whisper on phone calls that they have, and it's not really businesslike. So he really would appreciate if the minyan could move to another building. And Daniel hears what he says. He recognizes that it's potentially an issue, and he says, "Oh, I'm gonna go get a psak." I actually don't know who the Rav was that issued the psak, but I saw this shaila and tshuva through an organization called Masa Umatan that deals with business-related ethical issues. And the tshuva begins with something we actually studied. Some of us studied together. Maybe it's a good couple of months or more ago. But the power of acceptable practice in a community is very powerful. And it was common, and maybe not so far off from our own living conditions here in Century Village, or certainly not on this scale, but very often people lived in small enclaves, whether it be a cul-de-sac or a little bit larger area, where they had common area. People had their. I know an aunt of mine lived in garden apartments in Queens, New York. Everybody had their own entrance, but in front was all common area. You had to get to any place, you had to walk through the common area, and that was a place. Kids sometimes played ball, whatever it is. So when you have this common area, there is a chazaka, there is a minhag that gets established. There's practice that's established, and if something has become routine and acceptable practice in this area, then somebody can continue and can also do the same practice. But if something has not been acceptable practice, then the community, even an individual, has a right to object and to say that he doesn't like this development here, it's bothering him, and he wants the person to stop. And the only exception to that, probably not something we'd have to worry about today, but the only exception to that would be if the community was not doing laundry in this public area, but they were going to a water's edge to do their laundry, and somebody started doing laundry in the public area, which in at least the ways things were set up in Mishnaic times would be a more modest setting than the riverbank was for doing laundry. So laundry was an exception to the rule. But as the general rule is, if the activity has not been taking place on an ongoing basis, then any member of the community has a right to object to this new practice. But on that score, especially in Israel, I mean, we're not strangers to outdoor minyanim, even here in Century Village, but in Israel, right now, it is very widespread. So you can't really argue that having a minyan in an apartment building, public yard, would be against acceptable practice. So on that particular score, of one person having a right to abrogate the access for others to this common space would not hold true. However, there are two other items, and even though the first item that Ruvain specified was not the real issue, but the tshuva dealt with the fact that Ruvain was complaining that people were looking into his window. And in general, the halacha does recognize hezek re'iyah, damage that's caused by somebody viewing into your private property, a private area. We talk about damage, it's not the physical damage, it's some kind of compromise of somebody's privacy. So as a general rule, when a person is building a house, say in an empty lot that's next to another house, that the guidelines from the Mishnah, from Halacha, is that you can't build a window in your house directly opposite your neighbor's window, because that's considered hezek re'iyah, damage that's caused by looking. I mean, today, we don't always have that type of privacy, so that becomes a new norm. But the norm in halacha, the default norm, if there hasn't been another community minhag established, is that when you build your house, or you build an extension, whatever it might be, or you just decide you need more light, more air in the room, that if there is no other accepted practice, then the default rule by halacha would be don't build opposite another viewing point into neighbor's property, because that would be wrong. So this hezek re'iyah, this visual damage, is an issue, but it also was dismissed because, after all, Ruvain does have curtains. He's elected not to close the curtains, and number B, if he doesn't close the curtains, all the other passers-by, whether they're walking on the sidewalk or driving by, they also have the ability to peer in. So it didn't seem that was really a legitimate concern. When it comes to possible hezek from shmiya, causing somebody damage by listening, actually that the halacha does not recognize. The person himself would have to modulate his voice or maybe add soundproofing or whatever it is, but it would not be a complaint that would allow Ruvain to demand that the minyan stop meeting in his premises. So bottom line is that maybe Ruvain wants to change some of his practices in his office and maybe rearrange the furniture, but he did not have a right to ask that the minyan relocate. Halacha, you see, this is halacha from a couple of thousand years ago, and so relevant in our lifetime. May halacha always guide our lives. A Shavua Tov to everybody.
Shavua
And you
Tov.
may unmute yourselves if you'd like to share wishes of Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
And again, a Yoshikayach, and thank you to Eitan Cantor for being with us.
Right.
And it's good to see everybody.
Shavua Tov, Rabbi Rebbitzin.
Shavua Tov, Rebecca.
And Leonard Shavua Tov.
Ron, Florence, Judy.
And Mark and Rita, Rebecca is on,
Leonard.
still on.
Yeah.
Ron Shavua
Thank you so
Tov.
much. Thank you for
Keith and
music.
Judy, I hear,
Liliana's here.
I'm wishing you to continue to enjoy the cold weather, I hear.
No.
No,
Keith
he's in
here.
Oh,
Florida.
Keith is here. Oh,
Oh, gosh.
There's at least one smart one in the bunch.
Statistics, because if you take a person and you put the person's right foot in a bucket of ice and the left foot in the bucket of hot coals, on the average, he should feel just great. So,
Right.
Good week. Thank you so
Florence,
much.
good
Thank you,
Shabbos. Good to see you
Etan.
this
Good
morning.
luck.
Good luck. Good luck.
Take care. Be well.
And,
We'll see you
our-
next
our
Saturday
other-
night.
Our other Ron and Wendy and Ileana.
Yes,
It does.
Shavua
my
Tov to
microphone's
everybody.
working now.
And Eitan Shavua Tov, and again, Yoshikar.
Hello,
And
hello,
thank you so much.
Eliana. Miss you all. We miss you all. Thank you,
Oh,
Eitan.
Rita,
Thank you very
Ritush
much,
Naima.
everybody. Good night. Good night.
Good night and good luck.
Good luck.